Thank you so much for accepting to step in to the panel. You know, we called Ruby at 4 o'clock, so I'm extremely grateful you accepted the challenge to come and join the panel for such an important discussion. Ruby started her career in law as a lecturer with the Civic Education Project funded by the Soros Foundation in Eastern Europe, but then returned to the UK to work as a corporate commercial lawyer with leading city firms. She founded RS Collaboration to really create a platform to develop, if you want, some solutions or innovative, if you want, avenues to bring corporate social responsibility, business and human rights together to address sustainability. And she currently serves as a member of the Law Society Business and Human Rights Advisory Group and is the vice chair of the Solicitors International Human Rights Group. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Ms. Kina was saying, how sort of complex it is to describe the situation in Eritrea, but also the role that the media does play. And the media, particularly the international media, is often used, quite important labels. Mary Harper was saying that, North Korea of Africa, giant slave camp, Africa's most, repressive state, labels they often stick. But you've been, you visited the countries several times. What would you say, would you say that this image portrayed by the media, the international media in particular, is accurate?
Well, thank you for having me here, and forgive me if I'm a little sort of ungathered, but I will ground over the sort of proceedings. It's a really good question you ask. For me, Eritrea was very much a journey. I started off looking at an issue around the rehabilitation and diaspora tax, which is effectively similar to a US citizen tax. And I was a partner at a law firm at the time. Subsequently, when I left the law firm, I continued the inquiry with the Solicitors International Human Rights Group. And my perception of Eritrea through the media was extremely negative. What I was seeing on sort of simple searches and speaking to individuals or academics was only one view, a very nuanced, very polarized view. So the inquiry really started independently. And I was looking at business ethics. How do companies operate in this so-called frontier market? And my outreach took me to Eritrea, and I actually went to visit a mine. It was the jointly owned BMSC mine, jointly owned by the government of Eritrea and NAMCO and a Canadian company, Nevson Resources Limited. And on that first trip, I was able to sort of really sort of get an understanding of the ground reality, because I went through, I of course arrived at Asmara, and then I travelled to the Gashbarka region, which is heading west of Asmara, and just meeting people and just talking to them. And an interesting experience where my heritage is Indian. I understand the three dialects, which is Punjabi, Hindu, and Urdu. I was able to speak to an Indian who was working at the mine, completely unplanned. I mean, it was, and I asked the line manager, could I actually speak to this individual? And I asked very direct and candid questions. So effectively, I didn't mean to be sort of on the field and to be asking these questions, but I was sort of given permission to do this. And you get a sense from the body language when you're speaking in another dialect whether somebody's being sort of honest or they're afraid, and I didn't get that experience. As a matter of fact, it was quite sort of jovial, candid. They were laughing at the situation. So I came back and I wrote a report, and unfortunately it was very difficult to try and find an outlet for that report. I was the vice chair of the Solicitors International Human Rights Group, but there was such a, I'm thinking of a word which isn't so emotive, but there were individuals, including lawyers, who really said that this report should not have been published under the Solicitors International Human Rights Group because it did not reflect the situation in Eritrea. And what they meant by that, actually, if we want to be accurate, is that business and human rights is a very new, innovative area that's complex, and it looks at sort of civil political rights and economic, social, cultural rights as well. And the factions here, or the polarized sort of view on Eritrea, is very much focused on civil political rights, which is the elections, freedom of expression, the journalists, etc. But when you have a country as poor as Eritrea and developing, particularly with its sort of history, and you have to understand its history, the long struggle, colonization, federation, annexation, all of that, you get an understanding that they have priorities. And I find it disturbing if we go in with our Western lens and try and tell them what to do. You have to engage. And in the 21st century, engagement is not about sort of, it's got to take a new way. We've seen what we've done in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. We've got to take a new line. And that was my sort of leverage. So forgive me, I have gone off. So it was entirely different, my ground reality. And I've been very open about discussing that. But I'm aware there are issues on civil political rights. We have issues here. Is our press free? You only have to look at what's happening in the US with the Trump election. But I think to engage with Eritrea, we have to understand Eritrea. And I note, Martin, you've got your book, Understanding Eritrea, but it requires a more holistic approach and an understanding of the complexity of the situation, and that mining companies are a lifeline to this country. So the question is, what with sort of the current sanctions, how do we engage with a country like that? So yes, it was a very, very different sort of perception on the ground. And forgive me, I hope I've not sort of gone off.
No, I'm sure that